You're listening to Go with Jamarlin Martin. We have a go hard or go home approach as we talk to the leading tech leaders, politicians, and influencers. Let's go. Today we have the legendary Alfred Liggins, the CEO of Urban One. How's it going, Alfred?
Going well. Thank you for inviting me onto the show.
So you're running a very big company, but we don't really see you a lot of media. Are you kind of media shy? We're like, hey, I just like to put my head down and run the business. But why don't we see kind of a lot of press from you personally?
I have historically been, I wouldn't say press shy. I'm not a press, pursuer. I'm not really crazy about just sitting around and, answering a bunch of questions, about what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. I much prefer to actually be doing it and running the business, so it's really kind of like an allocation, of time. I haven't really believed, that just because you get lots of press attention that it has anything to do with the success of your business. I think the success of your business is how focused you are on your customers or your core constituency, whether it's your viewers or listeners, or your advertisers or your capital partners. And so I've always preferred to spend my time with them than telling the general public, what a great job we're doing, et cetera. Now, with that said, I'm the CEO of a public company, so I spend a lot of time quarterly conference calls. If I get requested, by a press entity that I think would, be advantageous. So if the Wall Street Journal was to call us and ask us, about, a deal we were doing, I would have that, conversation. But I don't, actively seek out, myself having a presence on CNBC as a pundit, sort of, talking about my view of the world and the current state of the economy.
Your mother, Kathy Hughes,
Yep.
started the company. Did you really want to be in this game, media and advertising? When you stepped into this business, did you really want to get into the business?
In high school, they bought the radio station in 1980. I graduated in '83, so I was in the ninth or 10th grade. And I worked at the radio station in high school. And the answer is no, I didn't want to be in the radio business, at that time. I wanted to be in the record business. I liked music. It was sexy,
Who were your favorite artists?
Oh gosh.
At that time?
That was, that was the burgeoning of hip hop, so I definitely, was into the current hip hop, groups of the day. I think at that time, Run DMC was probably my favorite artist. I remember going to see the Raising Hell tour.
And you had a pair of shell toe Adidas?
I had a Run DMC jacket with Run DMC on the back. I used to wear it all the time. I loved it. But I also was, into Sting, when I was in my, early 20s. I liked the Police. I liked the Rolling Stones. I liked Prince. So my musical tastes were varied. So I wanted to be in the record business. And after high school, I actually went out to Los Angeles and sought out, jobs in the record business. And I did that, for about 18 months out there. And, LA is a fast town for a young guy. I ended up, I was working for a gospel record label called Light Records, and I thought I had a job lined up at Motown, and I quit my job at Light Records, and then the job at Motown didn't ultimately, come through, end up falling through, and so I learned my first lesson, in professional, pursuit is never quit a job before you have the next one lined up and in the bag, and so I was 20 years old, unemployed, in Los Angeles, and my mother said that she thought I should come back, to DC, work at the radio station, go to school at night, get my feet back up under me, and then go back out to LA and pursue whatever dreams I had again at a later time, and that ultimately ended up being a fortuitous suggestion. I took it. I was unemployed, so it wasn't like it wasn't that hard of a decision. But I came back and I started working the radio station. I've always had a knack and desire for sales. I was good at, and I started, selling, radio, and I started doing really well.
You were a gifted seller.
I was a gifted seller, and she needed young, talented, ambitious,
Hungry.
hungry folks that wouldn't leave, because we had a small little AM radio station, and everybody else would want to go to a bigger company. Well, I wasn't going anywhere, so I stayed, and I started making a lot of money, and that was the hook. It just grew from there. Actually, I remember exactly my very first year I made $60,000. This is in 1985. My second year I made $100,000, and then in my third year I made like $150,000, and that was a lot of money in 1988 for 23-year-old kid. I was bit by the radio bug. It was good, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna make the best.
It was a bull market in radio. You were in at the right time, would you say?
I wouldn't call it a bull market. At that time, it was before radio had deregulated at all. We had one AM station, but I found something that I could do well. I was in a position of importance because my mom, my family owned the station, so I could make make decisions. And so I kind of looked at my job then was, how do I expand this opportunity and make this opportunity bigger, better, more forward looking? And the answer to that was we needed to find out how to buy an FM radio station. The other advantage I had was my mother had hooked up with, two African-American venture capitalists. They gave her the seed money for the first radio station.
Were they based in?
They were based in Washington. And so I had access to those guys. So here's these two, brothers, that were out, looking to help raise money for and finance African American and Latino entrepreneurs to buy stuff. So it wasn't like I was just selling radio. I was talking to these guys about, hey, we want to get bigger. We want to buy an FM. And, they knew how to raise money and find investors. They were my mother's contemporaries, so considerably older than I, the conversation wasn't just, what's the next advertiser I'm going to get, or, what's the next, radio show idea. It was, okay, how do we buy more stations, and how do we grow, and how do we do that? And that was a really exciting and robust, sort of, petri dish for me to kind of like germinate in. And that's what happened. And in 1987, we looked at trying to buy a bunch of different radio stations, and most of them were, too expensive for us to afford, because, even they had limits, to how much money they could, raise.
The thinking to buy other stations, is that coming from Kathy or yourself, or both of you? You guys have like a thesis where, hey, we want to scale up.
We're partners, so we talk about, and she's my mother, right? Yeah. So we talk, but I was generally the architect of the expansion. I was the one who would, want to seek out. Now, by the way, she had wanted to buy an FM too, so well before I, got deeply involved in the in our expansions activity, she had tried to lead an effort to buy WKYS, which is a station we own now. But her approach at that time, because she was doing the morning show, was to raise the money out of the black community. It was the number one black radio station owned by NBC, and they had to sell it. Not, a novel approach, particularly, when you don't have any money, but turns out it was illegal. You can't just raise and sell securities over the radio. So when that came to her attention, because she had a listener that she didn't know, a loyal listener who worked at the Security and Exchange Commission, who evidently called her one day and said, Miss Hughes, I listen to your show every morning, and I really applaud what you're doing, but I want you to know that it's actually not legal. So ended up having to give, I think, raised like $500,000, and gave it back. That station ended up getting sold for $45 million. Way more money than we had any idea of how to raise or access. And then I, found a smaller station that was going to be sold, that was going to be cheaper, had lower power, but it covered the city, and where our audience was. And we were able to end up, buying that for like $7.5 million. And we own that station today. In fact, it's our best performing station in Washington now, WMMJ. And then we ended up, buying that station, WKYS, that sold for $45 million. We ended up buying it from the people who bought it for 45. We ended up buying it for $36 million, probably about 10 years later, in 1995.
Can you describe your transition from you're hustling, you're the sales guy, but then you start pushing buttons on the M&A side. You start buying stuff.
No, I graduated high school in 83. I came to the company full-time in 85. We bought our first FM in 87. So that happened in a 2-year period.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know your struggle, where there could be a perception of like, hey, this guy, his family owned the company. He had it real easy. I read something a while ago about you guys struggling as a family.
Yep.
Where you guys were living in a radio station.
Yeah,
Can you
no.
talk a little bit about that?
After, I moved to LA, and my stepfather also moved to LA. The house that we, had been living in, for the last 4 or 5 years while I was in high school, my mother, things at the radio station weren't going well, and my mother couldn't afford to keep up the rent on this, big, nice, house. So the station had some extra, space in it, so she made an apartment. The station had more space than they needed, because it was an AM and FM in the space, and they sold the FM to somebody else and sold the AM to my mom, my stepdad. So there was empty office space. So she ended up making that office space, her home. And when I moved back, and she was living there for, I forgot how long before, probably a year before, I moved. But when I moved back, I moved into the radio station, into that space, along with her, and forgot how long we lived there. So maybe we lived there for a year or so. But the fact of the matter is. I'm a beneficiary of nepotism. My mother owned an AM radio station. And she invited me to come work at it, and that's an opportunity, right? It takes a lot of gumption and courage to go out as an entrepreneur and start your own company and buy your own radio station. But it certainly wasn't, it wasn't a profitable business, when,
But you were closing deals, right? You were rising the ranks in that kind of short span. It wasn't like you came over and you started running the company on day one. It was more of, I'm out there selling, closing deals, understanding the business.
What fueled, I think, my rise in my standing with my mother and the investors was I became an anchor in the sales department. Sales started to go up. The little AM station started to make money, right? Because it was losing money before that. And so I think, we got it to where it was losing money. Now it was making, $300,000 or $400,000 a year.
You, Alfred Liggins, are claiming a lot of that alpha that you're bringing to the table in terms of the enterprise is increasing. A lot of the alpha is coming from you.
It's just me and my mother, right?
Yeah.
And 4 other sellers or 5 other sellers or whatever. And so so I was leading that effort. By the way, at her direction, meaning that I didn't know the business, right? She had to teach me the business, but then then I would run with it. And so I think the investors were happy to see, wow, this AM station that we thought our money was dead in, now has got revenue momentum. It's now profitable. And hey, these people want to grow, so let's back them to grow so they can, because I was like, we can work, we can keep working this hard, but at the end of the day, there is no future unless we get into the FM, station game, right? And so, and they very well could have said, look, it's making money now, just pay us our money back, or let's sell the radio station and we're out. But they chose, to invest in us growing and betting on us. They figured out, I found the radio station, and then they figured out a way, to raise the money to buy it. And then, and we bought that station, WMMJ, in 1987. And we put an innovative, radio format on it, urban adult contemporary, because before that, all black radio stations all had kind of the same format, and it was a big hit. The first year, it wasn't a big hit because we didn't change the format. It was a soft adult contemporary station, Barbra Streisand, Barry Manilow,
Yeah.
and the bank wanted us to keep it.
You guys are competing in the more mainstream where there's too many
Yeah,
players
and
out
we
there.
we didn't know what we were doing, and it wasn't working, and the station ended up falling out of the ratings, and so then we went to the bank and said, "Can we do what we know how to do now?" And so we changed the format, and the thing was a success, and then we started making a lot of money over the next 5 years. The station, we went from having an AM station that was making $300,000, to over the next 5 years, that FM station, along with the AM, we were billing like $10 million and making like five. Yeah, I mean, we were doing like $5 million.
Are you running each radio station with their own P&L? Is that
No, it was always a combined P&L.
All combined. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the start of it, and so MMJ, big success. And then it's like, okay, let's, where do we grow next? And so we started looking up the road in Baltimore, and we bought our first, station outside of Washington in 1992. That was WWIN AM and FM.
Did the writers of Empire, did they call you to get some consulting? 'Cause it's not probably too many family groups that have taken a business to the level of you and Kathy.
We know Lee Daniels very well, and my mother had a script and a television idea that in fact we made a movie out of it on TV1 called Media, that was very similar to this story and very similar to the Empire story. Let's just say the concept of a black media entertainment business family was not a new concept when Empire hit the air.
Particularly, when I was watching Empire and they want an IPO, you and Kathy actually did the thing.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of us people who look like us who have gone through that process.
Yeah. Well, that happened. I was always, focused on that. I saw all these other companies, guys, entrepreneurs buying radio stations, and I was like, how'd they afford that? Where'd they get the money to do that? Because I knew these two guys at Syndicated Communications, and I was constrained by how much capital they had or their network of people or how they finance things, and they were what you called MESBICs, Minority Enterprise Small Business Investment Corporations, and so they weren't big money managers, but I saw all these other companies buying a lot of radio assets, and I wondered how they did that. And it, turned out they were accessing the public markets, whether it was public debt, and then public equity. And so I made it my business to get to know some investment bankers. I forgot how I, met the first one, but there was this guy named Mark Levitt.
Were you just cold calling?
I don't remember how I met Mark, but somewhere along the line when we were small, Mark became a friend, and he started, and he was at Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer was a small bank. It wasn't like Bear Stearns, or it wasn't one of the big, Wall Street banks. And I think I may have met, Mark Levitt through a guy named Reagan Henry, who was a big African American owner who's now passed away. That had a big company called U.S. Radio. And so Mark was my first entree into learning how the public markets, ultimately worked. And then I started reading up on it, and he came down and talked to the board, and I said, "Look, this is a direction that we need to head in," and then I got a call after we'd made a few more acquisitions. We bought into Baltimore, bought our competitor in Baltimore, then we doubled back and bought WKYS, here in Washington D.C., and then we entered Atlanta. We did all this with bank debt. I got a call out of the blue from a woman named Kristen Allen from Credit Suisse, First Boston, and they were the bank that had been taking everybody public, all the big radio companies. And so she called me and introduced herself, and she's like, "This is Kristen Allen from Credit Suisse," and she started talking, and I was like, "Well, I'm very familiar with who you are." And so they were a real Wall Street bank, and they introduced us to high yield debt, otherwise known as junk bonds, and they did our first high yield bond deal, and we got rid of the banks, and put the high yield debt in.
They had a star banker, I think, around this time.
Frank Quattrone.
Yeah, got in trouble. Did you ever meet him?
I don't think I
Guy
ever
with
met.
that shady mustache.
I never met Frank, but he was doing all the Silicon Valley deals. Yeah. When I discovered high yield debt, I thought I'd died to gone to heaven because I'd been financing these deals with bank debt, and you had covenants, and you had to hit certain, revenue and cash flow numbers, and your leverage had to come down, every year or quarter, and the banks, they got to a position also where they really, wanted to lend to bigger companies and didn't want to do smaller deals. It was really challenging, to deal with them. If they had bad real estate loans, and all of a sudden they get negative on radio. But the high yield market, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because basically they'll lend you money for 8 years and you pay interest only, and you don't have to pay it back till the end, right? And I was like, "Whoa, that's great," And so, and no covenants, right? So. Your money doesn't come due if you miss a number.
The junk bond king,
Michael Milken.
Michael Milken.
Yeah.
Where was he at? He was at
Drexel Burnham.
Okay, got it. Did
Yeah.
you guys ever deal with him? Is this around the same time that he's just
No, it was
gorging?
before that. I think Drexel was in the early '80s, and now when I'm doing all of this stuff, we did our first bond deal in '97. Yeah, I think Drexel was gone by then. I don't remember the exact date. We'd have to look it up. But I never met. I think I met Mike Milken years later. After he'd been sort of. Excommunicated out of the industry.
Yeah. I don't know. With Frank Quattrone and Michael Milken, it seems like a lot of the famous guys.
They circle
they
back.
Got in trouble. They got in trouble.
They got in trouble. They circle back. Milken's got a whole new platform now.
Yeah.
With his, he's got a
Foundation.
big conference and the whole bit. And
Yeah.
I mean, he made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Who knows? Maybe even billions. I mean, he made a lot of money, right?
Do you go back to UPenn Wharton? Do you go back before the IPO or after?
I went back before. I went back in '93. I graduated in '95, and we went public in '99.
And what were you thinking at that time where you're already a success story? You got, some stuff going. Why do you go back to B school?
My mother always wanted me to have some sort of degree.
She thought that the corporate establishment would respect you more.
Yeah, and I think from where she came from, that was important. She never ended up, getting an opportunity to graduate from college. So I think she wanted that, for me. I didn't end up I went to night school at the University of the District of Columbia for a year, right? And then I dropped out in radio, to sell radio. And so, I hadn't followed in that, path that she would have liked to have seen me take. And so I was reading the newspaper, the Washington Post, the business section, prospecting for advertising leads, and I saw an ad for the Wharton Executive MBA program. And the way it was described in the ad is like, hey, you go on the weekends, it's the same professors, the same curriculum, it's for executives who have to work. And I was like, Wharton, University of Pennsylvania. So I don't know what possessed me to actually call up and find out if you needed a college degree to get into the executive program. And I talked to the assistant head of admissions, a woman that still works there, Wharton, named Kathy Maloney. And I asked her if you need a college degree. And, to my surprise, she said,
nobody really. That's a shock to me. I would think you would need
She said, no, it's not a requirement. Like, you apply, you take the GMAT like everybody else, recommend it, and we look at you. More importantly, people wanted folks to have business experience, and I had a ton of that, right?
Yeah, you may get a geek with a high GMAT score, but hey, I can also scale a business up.
So there was something very intriguing about it would be. I could go on the weekend. So it wasn't like, because me stopping working and going back to school for 2 years was a non-starter. So the setup of the program played to my, my current situation. And second, it was very sexy that it was Wharton. And I was like, well, look, this could be, a neat, way of ending up with an Ivy League degree.
Yeah.
Right. And so I decided to pursue that because I liked that idea that the guys at CENTCOM, Terry Jones and Herb Wilkins, were both graduates of Harvard Business School, and so that was a badge of honor that they had, and they liked that stuff. And so I thought, it would also be impressive to them if I went back and, got my MBA, from a very well-respected school. So it was like getting your ticket punched. At the end, I didn't make any real contacts that helped me with my business.
You don't have any relationships that came out of that.
No,
that paid off.
I probably lost money because the radio industry was just starting to consolidate, and if I'd spent more time buying more radio stations, that ultimately would have risen in value. I'd be,
So as a net distraction where, hey, I didn't really get any big relationships.
No, put it this way, it's only a net distraction if I assume that I would have spent more time figuring out how to buy more radio stations. And that may not necessarily have been the case because there's probably one radio station that I might have bought. I had the opportunity to buy WDAS, in Philadelphia. And I got nervous about where we were going to get the money from before we signed up, and I backed away from it. And this happened while I was, in school. It's probably the single biggest radio deal that, I regret. I had a letter of intent to buy it for $23.5 million. I ended up walking away from it. The guy, Gene Jackson, African-American guy, sold it to this company, Beasley Broadcasting, George Beasley, for like $28 million. Beasley and those guys did what we did in Washington with an urban adult contemporary format, made it very successful. Ratings went up. They turned around and sold it 5 years later for like $100 million. So in my mind, I screwed up. But I'm really glad I went back and I did it.
Because you feel like your mind sharper, you're a better CEO because of that experience?
And I have that experience. I know what an Ivy League business school is like. I know how they think, what they teach. It's something that I have in common, with other people that I, interact with.
Did you actually feel kind of the corporate establishment assigning more value, or hey, I never really saw anything different in terms of my pedigree of education?
I gotta tell you, I have on numerous occasions had people were impressed by it, like bankers, people
kind of one of us.
Exactly. It's like a club. You know what I mean? I went to Penn, you're a Penn guy, or I went back to business school, and because they all did it.
Yeah.
And so it's like a club.
I won't question your intellect as much because I know you come from Penn.
Or I know you've gone through the same educational process, at the level that I have. Yeah. So I'm, it's like, your ticket's punched. That's just the way they view it. Doesn't mean that it's true. Some of the smartest people, most successful people, dropped out of college, there's so many stories of people who had gumption, and brilliance that didn't have an Ivy League degree, and so, but that's why I did it. Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have, if it had been the University of Maryland, I wouldn't have done it. No offense to the University of Maryland, but I'm just saying, it's kind of like, it was my first aspirational, vanity, play. Instead of like wanting to get a Louis Vuitton, duffel bag, right? I wanted to have a Wharton, business degree.
As you know, the game has changed in terms of the massive debt loads students are under. Do you think at a macro level in this country that, hey, going to B school, we need to rethink the risk reward in terms of how we approach elite education, expensive education?
I got to tell you, man, I'm really just starting to wrap my brain around this whole student debt thing because, I didn't deal with it because I didn't really go to, I went to college at night, right? The University of District of Columbia was $1,500 a semester. It was like, it was nothing. When I went to business school, it was more expensive. I forgot what it was, $45,000 a year or whatever. The company paid for it. That may be one of the reasons why I got in, because I didn't ask for financial aid, right? I was like, we're writing a check. However, today, as I sit at 53 and I start to talk to young people, and quite frankly, my girlfriend, is a dentist that went through school with student loans, et cetera. And, when I realize what it takes to come out and go through that program and the debt that you amass over that period of time, it's just shocking to me. And that's, that's at a professional degree, but even if you're coming out of college and you're coming out with $120,000 or $200,000 worth of debt, that's a big hole that you're in, from the start. And I think, ultimately people have to make, I think people are starting to make the risk reward sort of calculation in their head, but you have a problem because having education is still ultimately a marker for whether you're going to be more successful or less successful. It just happens to be that it's super expensive now. And so I don't know what the solution is.
One stat has up to 50% of indebted students not paying on their loans. And so, of course, as you know, some people are predicting that the massive amount of student debt, where the wages are not going up, that's going to be the next crisis, that debt load is building up. Like a subprime mortgage bond situation that we experienced in 2008.
I mean, it's like, if you're coming out, if you got $500,000, in debt, you got to make a lot of money to pay that off, and you're paying interest on it. I mean,
Do you see anything nuanced where student debt could impact our community, the African American community, a bit more? Where, hey, it's a problem for the country, but is it magnified? Do you see anything where it'd be magnified for us?
I mean, I don't have any numbers to back this up, but I would, I probably would be willing to bet of, as a percentage of our community that goes to college, we have a higher ratio of folks that have taken on loans to get there because there's less money in our community, for our parents to go ahead and just write a check, right, and educate us debt free, and so we're probably suffering more under the weight, of this debt phenomena than other.
We have less parental support, less financial support.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're reaching. Yeah.
We don't have the historical household, wealth pools to fall back on to educate our kids. So if our kids want to get school now, I got to tell you, it definitely is a problem all across the country because we've got a pretty well diversified company in terms of ethnicity and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of young white kids that don't come from wealthy families, right? Because it's not, even if you grow up in a middle class white neighborhood and you live in a nice decent, you're not poor or whatever, when it comes time to foot a $60,000 or $70,000 or $80,000 college bill for a year, like those families, they can't afford that. Those kids are going into debt.
Yeah, definitely. I just think it's magnified for our community in terms of less legacy wealth. Even on a small scale.
You're starting from less, so that means your hole's deeper.
You bought back the remaining stake of TV One from Comcast. From my perspective, you're a deal guy in terms of, hey, you like to do deals. You want to think about scaling up in terms of, hey, I got to be big to really matter.
Yeah.
Why haven't you hooked up with BET? Where, I could see, the big agencies and the advertisers, they're playing us against each other. Why haven't the big boys, BET, hooked up?
I mean, I forgot what year it was. Actually, I do remember what year it was. It was right before BET sold to Viacom. So, I forgot what year it was where they sold in 99. But Bob Johnson tried to get me to merge with them.
You didn't like the price.
No, it didn't even really come down, to price. At the end of the day, economically, we had opportunities to sell the company a number of times. Bob Johnson
for a really big number.
I got offered, the radio company got offered to be bought by what at that time was a company called Evergreen, which became AM/FM, which ultimately became Clear Channel. It's got Scott Ginsburg tried to buy the company, Mel Karmazan, who built Infinity, and then ultimately ended up, getting CBS and was running Viacom. He tried to buy the company, and we didn't want to sell. We liked what we were doing. We figured,
You're profitable.
we're making money. We're going to create value. And I never looked at it as, okay, I'm going to sell, put, 50 or $100 million in my pocket, and then I'm done, right? I always thought, I'd go and I'd, build a big enterprise and, and stay in the game and make a lot, more money, down the line. Now, if I had taken those offers, I'd be, wealthier today, because the media business ended up, traditional media business ended up, contracting. And actually, a lot of the radio companies, including what was Clear Channel, now iHeartMedia, went bankrupt. Citadel went bankrupt. Intercity Broadcasting went bankrupt. Cumulus, went bankrupt, right? Now we didn't go bankrupt, but our radio cash flows are half of what they were. And the only reason we're around today is because we did diversify. We got into the cable business, we're in the gaming business now. As you know, we're in the digital business. I don't know where that's going to end up, but we're in it. And so we did have an opportunity to match up with BET when we were just a radio company. I said no. I said one day I'll want to be in the TV business and the cable business. And he said, well, you can't get in the cable business. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, because my partner's John Malone, and John Malone is never going to give you distribution to compete with BET. And so I was like,
man,
okay.
That sounds like a real boss move. Like, kind of like, but that's how the game works, right?
It's
like
was
a
true.
mafia.
It was true, right?
Yeah.
But look, I get it. It makes sense. Why are you going to create more competition for an entity that you're a part, owner of? So Bob was right about that. And then he said, but I can get into the radio business. So I think he toyed after that with buying.
So he's threatening you that he could come. If you don't take my deal, I'll come after you, but you can't come after me.
Yeah, kind of basically. And but he was right? And Clear Channel had bought AM/FM, and they had to spin off a bunch of stations, like 200 stations. And Bill Kennard was the chairman of the FCC, and he told them that you should sell a lot of these stations to minorities. And so they were selling all these stations, and Bob was at the table, and he was going to buy, a bunch of stations. As we were, we're going to buy some stations too, but we were competing against him.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he decided. Now, economically, it was the right decision against buying, radio. And I think, they probably had ultimately decided that they had taken BET private, that they were even, going to sell BET. So he didn't end up getting in the radio business. We bought all the stations that we wanted from Clear Channel, doubled the size of the company. We were public by then. But in the end, the better economic decision would have been for us to sell or to merge, because he sold BET for $3 billion. And if we had been part of that sale, we'd have a lot of money in our pocket, but we'd also be starting over, right? We wouldn't have our platform today. So if, having a platform and building and staying in the game, is important to you, then it wasn't, the wrong decision. And then later on, after we had created TV One, I forgot how many years we'd been on the air. It may have been gone in our fourth year. BET had reached out. Deborah Lee had reached out to us about buying TV One, and we weren't interested. We just, we wanted to keep doing what we were doing. I've had several overtures from bigger strategics,
but not BET. After you get in the game with TV One, and actually, I thought I remember reading in the paper I believe you were testifying in Congress.
Yeah,
I thought I had read that Bob Johnson was trying to block you. It was something related to the FCC.
It was set-top boxes. Yeah. Bob, there was a move. Silicon Valley was trying to get the cable industry to open up their set-top box data and let them write basically software for those set-top boxes and get access to the data and content, and try to do it by sort of federal regulation. And that stuff's proprietary. B, us content owners don't want Silicon Valley anywhere near the box because they're just going to try to create user interfaces and sell advertising around it, just like Google does, right? And Bob was on the technology side because he's got a new streaming service, or Urban Movie Channel. So he's looking for the ability to have access to these cable homes without having to go through the gatekeeper stuff of the cable and the satellite company. So we were on the opposite side of that issue, and ultimately we won that issue, but he's a good friend. I have a lot of respect for him. He created, something, many things, out of nothing. And I was admiring, and quite frankly, the reason I'm in the cable business is because I saw him do it and I wanted to emulate him. Yeah. And, there's two guys who've, created successful, black television networks, that make money, in this country. Bob was the first guy to do it, and I was the second guy to do it. And so,
Bob's CEO at the time for RLJ Entertainment, some years ago, he wanted to buy my company, and it was like around Christmas. We were supposed to really crank it up a notch, and Bob didn't want to do it, and apparently he got into it with the CEO, who was really bullish on the deal.
Well, you know what? That shit happens. Bob's done a lot. He's been in so many businesses, and a lot of people don't know this. He's the largest African-American owner of car dealerships in the country.
Yeah,
he's got like $1 billion of revenue.
Carlyle Group, right?
I don't know if Carlyle is his partner. I don't, I don't know how he's financed it, but he got like $1 billion of revenue. I don't know how many dealerships that is. Yeah. He's, had, 2 lodging hotel REITs, right? He's got a venture cap. he's done so many things.
Yeah, he has a hotel in Liberia.
Yeah, and one of the things that he had done was he'd been in the internet business. He, did the deal, we had BET.com when that first started up. You and I both remember that. And then he bought Russell Simmons' 360 Hip Hop. So by the time it came to do a deal with your company, I think, he'd had his fill of the non-success of the digital content business, right? He was early, in it, and I hear
burned.
And he's probably I'd prefer I prefer car dealerships.
You guys decided to go in another direction with Roland Martin's show.
Yep.
And I thought about Deborah Lee's comment in the press, where Deborah Lee says they canceled their news program. People were complaining on the BET side, and Deborah Lee came out in the media and she said that, hey, you guys want positive programming, but we put on the positive programming. You guys don't show up in defense of BET and the criticism. And so what I had thought at the time is, hey, if you guys have been feeding the community crack for decades, and then you start trying to, give them vegetables with talk shows, that's not going to work.
Right.
People are already, they have an appetite for something. And when, I saw the similar criticism with TV One on Roland Martin, but being in that business seat, I know that, hey, who's going to pay the bills if the people are not supporting the programming?
Right.
Meaning that it would be irrational for you to pull Roland Martin if it's making money, making a good number.
Yeah. Now, look, the Roland Martin decision was a hard decision. I decided to put the show on the air in the first place, so it was kind of my baby. And ultimately, it didn't get a large audience, but we knew that it wasn't going to get a super large audience. But what ultimately really happened is the pay TV business got tougher, right? You started to get cord cutting, and you start to see subscriber losses.
ESPN getting smoked.
Right, ratings going down because the universe is getting smaller, right? And so your programming budgets, end up getting constrained because your top line's getting constrained, and so then you have to make decisions. And we had it in the morning, and we ultimately had to make a decision, and it was a very expensive show. We're spending $5 million a year to produce that show, and so we had to make a decision as to, in order to best serve our audience and to be competitive, can we afford to invest that kind of money in a morning news program, or should we redirect those dollars into other day parts where we can get a larger audience? And ultimately, we decided that we were going to pull the plug on that show. We're going to revisit what our next sort of news vehicle is going to be, and in the meantime we're going to reinvest those dollars into prime time programming. And we've got a new exciting daily show opportunity coming in 2019 that we're outselling in the upfront, that will run in prime and late night, where it has an opportunity to gain a much wider audience, and it's the same $5 million just repurposed, and those are hard decisions that you have to make. If business was stronger, then you could continue to carry a news program that is more of a community service, and less of a profit engine, right? But that's just not the situation that a network like ours, being smaller, not owned by a big giant media company, is in today. Hopefully we can grow to a position where we don't have to make a decision like that.
Let's talk about that, hard decisions, because I probably don't know anybody who has made more hard decisions from a business perspective as you. You've been in the trenches making hard decisions. Talk to younger CEOs and entrepreneurs about making the hard decision where you become friends with folks who work with you, folks who help you build your company. You begin to love these people. However, from a business perspective and industry changes, performance changes, you have to break up. Can you talk a little bit about, I'm sure at some points you struggle making those tough decisions with, hey, the business is telling us to do this, but it's impacting my personal relationships.
Yeah, I mean, look, so two things. Yes, it's hard, but B, it's a business. This is not, it's not a family household. I mean, even though we look at our employees, in our company, as extended family, but the reality, is that, it's not an immediate family, household. It's not just, it's not a group of friends that are gathered, to socialize. It's a business here that is built to serve a community, and to to serve it well with integrity and profitably. So you have to make, you have to approach those decisions in a business like manner.
And have you always been like that, or you grew into that kind of comfortability? Hey, I got to be the gecko this time.
I've kind of always
From Wall Street.
Well, look, gecko greed is good is very different.
But I mean, meaning that you have to look at the decision as transactional in the sense that, hey, I got to save my company. I got to grow the company. It's not personal.
Here's the thing. I can't be of assistance to my immediate family or to any of my friends if my business is not successful. Let's start there. All right. I like to think that I'm a resource for my family. I'm a resource to my friends, people, but that only happens if my if my business footing is sound and if I have resources. So the minute that I let that not be the case, I'm a less effective person in my personal and my family life in order to be helpful on that level. So I've always protected that. And although the business family is personal to us, it's personal, but we're here at the pursuit and the success of the business, because if the business is successful, then each of us then can also be successful at home, right? So if you are running a unit, or you're a manager of a successful, part of any company, or this company, then that success, you're going to reap the benefits of that success at work, and that success and those benefits are going to filter back into your personal household, right? And that's going to, inure to your wife, to your kids, to your mother, to your cousins, to your friends, etc. And so that's really kind of the premise of how I looked at it. So you got to make the right business decisions. I've seen so many places go down because they got emotional about things. They got attached to stuff. They wouldn't let go of something, because they were so close to it. But if you go down in flames, you can't help anybody.
From a cultural standpoint, do you believe that African American CEOs, they, based on, you've rubbed shoulders with folks all around the American business establishment, but do you feel like if you come from a traditional African American experience, you with these hard decisions you have to make in the corporate environment, there's too much heart and not enough brain in terms of making these difficult decisions?
Well, you started off with African American CEOs. Look, there's a whole, I don't want to say a whole bunch of, but there are, a number of the African American CEOs that I know, Richard Parsons or Ken Chenault or, Stan O'Neill.
Maybe not at that level.
Yeah,
maybe not.
Those guys make decisions with brains, right?
Yeah.
But yes, I have seen, particularly with small minority businesses, family-owned minority businesses, they they're afraid to take on partners and expand and raise capital. They won't let go of a dying line of business and transition to to something new. Right?
Or the nickel and diamond investor.
You know what I mean? And so those are ultimately mistakes. Because sometimes you gotta bite the bullet on something that was your idea or was the start of something and pivot and go in a different direction in order to to be successful. As they say in football, run for the daylight.
Yeah.
And I've seen people struggle with that.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about political advertising with HRC and Trump. We didn't get any direct money from the Democrats in terms of our digital platform. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, do you feel like black media is shortchanged because there's a rational philosophy
right.
that, hey, you black folks, you Negroes don't have anywhere to go. Where are you going to go?
Well, you didn't get any money because we took it.
So it's kind of like, hey, you guys are going to show up anyway. But even if you do get money, maybe you're not getting the proportion in terms of that would really cover the be commensurate with the black vote.
Yeah, I argued about that a lot, and it happened a lot during the Obama administration. I mean, I remember in his re-election bid, I remember going to see his campaign manager in Chicago, this guy Jim Messina, and was trying to sell him on the need for black voter turnout, et cetera. And he informed me, he was giving me the election on the electoral college, right? Electoral college. That's all he was focused on. He wasn't really all that concerned about black voter turnout and
I got him anyway,
and our platform, and so I always felt that the black voter has been taken for granted, and organizations have underspent to reach it. Now, we're in the middle of a political year right now, and we're doing pretty well with it. We don't do phenomenal, but we do probably better than some other formats in constituencies, but it has been a problem. We also have a focus on it now. We've got like a person in our organization who focuses on nothing but political and governmental ad dollars, right?
Yeah.
But now there's way more at stake. Right now, particularly, this
After
year,
MAGA.
What this year, and they don't have Barack Obama at the top of the ticket.
They got to work harder. I've been thinking that in some cases, MAGA could be a good thing for Black America. And one is, hey, if you don't take that black vote serious, the Democrats, you guys got big wallets out there in terms of your media advertising and your outreach and how you're going about things. Yeah, the people are voting 90% Democratic, but we can stay home.
I got to tell you. So look, when the Republicans started to spend money, in the last election, Trump, Hillary, the Republicans started to spend money before the Democrats did on our stations. They weren't
on the black stations.
On us in particular. We had a meeting with the RNC. I had a personal meeting with Reince Priebus. They wanted to, because the way they looked at it is, if I can just change the black, I don't have to win the black vote, but if I can affect it by 1 or 2 percentage points, okay, that's the difference between winning and losing, okay, in a lot of places. And they spent money against it and got out early, and the Democrats didn't do that, and I think during that election, I would tell people, I said, look, you're going to be, I said, black people are going to respond to Trump. This was early on. This is before all of the stuff that has happened now, right? But early on, when we first started to run, the Donald Trump that black people knew was Trump the billionaire, art of the deal, the Taj Mahal
guy.
I mean, the aspiration,
the boss,
right? That's what they know. They don't know Trump the businessman. They don't know who Trump really is personally. They don't know any of those things. They
Central
see
Park 5. They don't know about that.
They don't know. They know that this guy was a billionaire, flashy, Trump
Mike
Tower,
Tyson,
and all that.
Michael Jackson.
And they, that's not a negative to them, right? Now, fast forward when, he starts talking about his policies and this, that, and the other, and you get, reactions like you did in Charlottesville, right? African Americans have a different perception altogether. But I'm talking about on the early days when he first started running, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I was telling Democrats, you need to protect against that. You need to market against that.
You were telling them directly.
Yeah. Because I said, it's not like they look at, George Bush and go, oh, that guy, he's definitely not for me. He's not, Trump had a little, he had
swagger.
He had swagger and an aspirational, kind of, aura, around him.
All right, so let's try to take you out of Urban One, and let's take you hypothetically as Barack Obama's advisor. So our people love Barack Obama, love Michelle. Hey, the spreadsheet is saying these people, when you look at the dollars, hey, I have $200 million. These people coming out for me no matter what, right? Right? These people crazy about us. These people coming no matter what. So financially, I'm putting my cold accountant analyst hat on. If these people are coming out and I don't got to do anything, I need to put my money where it's a little kind of in the middle. What would you advise Obama to do in terms of, if you're just going by the data, in terms of getting a bang for your buck?
Look, because we had the excitement of the first black president, because he's such a great orator, brilliant guy, people really didn't talk about, the fact that there really wasn't an agenda for African Americans, during that.
He's like, hey, I'll help everybody.
And lots of people argued, well, we were, the bedrock 90+% turnout vote that
We're not getting the dividend like the Cuban vote.
mostly the way politics has worked in the past is you reward those people who've helped you get there, particularly if they need it, right?
Yeah.
And so I was in lots of conversations, high circle conversations with CEOs, entrepreneur, and business people that are all trying to grow their businesses and felt like they really didn't have an angle or an access or an opportunity to
With the Obama administration.
with the
Wow.
with the Obama issue, but nobody would talk about it publicly
Because everyone loves it. He's like the Jesus.
You don't want to disrespect
Your
you know what I
own.
mean? Yeah, but believe me, everybody talked about it, and they still
So
talk.
you're saying that there was a club of CEOs that felt like, hey, Obama, this is our time. Let us holler. And you're saying that there was just no real connectivity.
There was no connectivity. Put it this way: most of the people that I knew didn't see it, and I knew a lot of well placed people. And he chose to not play that path, right? And that's what. So going back to your question, if you say the data, hey, we're going to get these people anyway. My advice would have been, hey, party, your legacy, you're a great president. Your legacy is going to be you're the first black president, and this constituency, helped you get there. They're in need. I would think that you would need to give that constituency a nod in some form or fashion,
But it
because
sounds like now you're talking about objectively wasting money, though. I'm saying that, hey,
I don't look. You're talking about. I don't know. I don't ever consider advertising or marketing, objectively wasting money at all. Because you're
I'm
never.
just saying in terms of which pots you put in. Do you go after the kind of confused or middle of the road white independent who can go either way? Do you put your dollars over there, or hey, I got all these people over here?
I call it shoring up your base. Okay, and so no, I don't look at it as objectively, wasting money.
You wouldn't- yeah.
Yeah. First of all, there was $1 billion spent on the campaign. I mean, they had more. There was no shortage.
A slush fund.
There was no shortage of money, right?
And even in the battleground states, you could
shortage.
still do something more
No
with
shortage
the
of
black
money.
outreach.
But look, that was one of the disappointing things. There was not a specific, plan for our audience, this community. But it was what it was, and I think that all people who felt that way, were cool, respectful, and it was, and we all operated and moved on, and and quite frankly, people now, are looking, in the rearview mirror, and still don't have, a plan ahead of us, in this new administration. And I think from a presidential tone, standpoint, Obama is looking like, George Washington right now, right? What I mean, compared to what the tone of the country and what's coming out, of the White House today. So my advice would have been shore up your base. It's not as if reward those who've been, loyal, and there wasn't a lack of money.
Yeah, they could just have a big slush fund.
It's. I mean, I don't know if there's a slush fund, but I forgot what the number was. But it was like they had it was $1 billion spent, or say. I mean, they had tons of money, right? I tell you what, I've raised money and given money to candidates that I know can't win because they're African American and they're trying, and who knows, maybe one day when Al Sharpton ran for president, I raised like $150,000 for him, and I called my friends and they were like, why are we doing this? You can't win. I said, that's not the point. The point is, that, this is an advancement, of our community and our representation.
It pushes
our seat at the table, right?
Yeah.
And so, I look at that as the same as, you're spending money to shore up your base, even when you know that they're going to be there anyway.
Yeah, that's what some of our people said in Florida. They said, "I'm not backing Gilliam because he doesn't have a shot." And what does he do? He wins.
You're right.
Yeah.
You know, so you got to keep pushing your agenda. You got to keep,
Yeah.
But anyway, that's again,
So Facebook has been in the news. They have hired some black executives to go after multicultural dollars, advertising dollars. And before this scandal, some folks in the industry said that they had a plan where they were going to really build out a push to get more multicultural dollars to the audience. A lot of the ad agencies, not a lot, but they have separate multicultural budgets.
Our Chicago, the head of our Chicago office went to run that.
They picked her off,
Yep,
right? So
yep.
so I was hearing kind of behind the scenes that Facebook has this push that we want to go into the black advertising budgets and crush that too. Do you feel like Facebook has any responsibility where they come in and they start taking billions of dollars out of the ad marketplace, and where the black media is just crushed? Right. Do you feel like, hey, that they don't have any responsibility? Like, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They want the black money too, and hey.
No, I don't think they have any responsibility to. They don't have
to the community. Do they have any responsibility to the black media?
They don't have a responsibility not to compete. Advertisers, the people who have the advertising budgets, have a responsibility to decide, how do I want to use my marketing dollars? Because when you buy Facebook or Google, you're just buying reach. You're not buying context. You're not buying relevant content. And you can make a decision that you think advertising that is more contextually relevant, okay, is more effective, or advertising that's mass and cheap is more
well, I would argue
effective.
that with their new video push, that they're buying shows. Jada Pinkett Smith is on Facebook, so they're getting kind of original programming. They're coming in that space, but I guess so. Let me just give you a hypothetical. Facebook hires 100 ad sellers and says, "I want to go to Burrell. I want to go to Uniworld. I want to go to whatever's left, and I want it all." And they have the stuff that you're talking about, meaning that they can do deals with influencers and celebrities, and they want it all. How?
Well, first of all, there's not enough money at Burrell for them to hire 100 sellers to go after it, right?
I'm talking about what's left.
Yeah.
Let's say MediaVest.
I just was at the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters, conference yesterday, and Mark Pritchard, who's the CMO of Procter & Gamble, was there, and he gave an outstanding presentation about his company's commitment to diversity, traditional media. They're starting to move more money back into radio, out of digital, because, they've had issues with, a
lot of shady practices.
The effectiveness. He talked about the importance, of contextual relevance, right? And he talked about all the myths that were out there. Hey, I get black people in my general market buy, or, there's enough black people in our ad, or that, we're going to appeal to everybody. He was very specific that he thinks that targeted, tailored, media is more effective, and he was also, very positive on the need to support Black-owned, Hispanic-owned media and to support those communities. He's the largest advertiser in the world, right?
Yeah.
And so because they sell to those communities, right?
And he's been critical of Facebook. Yeah.
And so look, at the end of the day, Silicon Valley's job ultimately is to do more with less people, with less human beings. That's what technology, ultimately, that's what they're aiming at. I remember I was having a conversation with this, former big GE executive, had risen to the top ranks, African American, and I'd read all the Six Sigma stuff and all these things about GE's their system, their playbook,
Yeah.
right? And they all talked about productivity. And I was like, what the hell is productivity? I didn't really, because I read the Jack Welch book, and I said, tell me, what does productivity mean? And he just said, doing more things with less people. So you got a factory where, it took 5 guys to man the machines to make something. Productivity is figuring out a way to make it 2 guys standing back, manning these machines and getting it done. And that's, so that ultimately kind of flies in the face of artisan creativity, next level, sort of connection, ideation. And Facebook is a big technology platform. They're going to be able to reach more people and be cheaper, but we've got to find out what's our, differentiation.
But this relates to, let's say, hey, Facebook comes in and kills.
So I'm sorry. So we find out what our differentiation is, and then we have to sell it to the advertisers. And I think the responsibility is ultimately for a Procter and Gamble or for a Kroger or for Coca-Cola to see that as value and not just the tonnage, that you can buy. And I get you. They'll have some content there, but they're probably not. They're not going to go head first into the content business. They'd buy a content company.
Have they ever reached out to you in terms of building a relationship?
No.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know anybody there.
You're the biggest platform out there.
I don't.
Well, back to responsibility, I would counter that where, as you know, the practices of Facebook, where admittedly Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg, they say, hey, we were too focused on growth, being productive, right, and just killing everything in our way. But what we've learned is that the big wallets out of Silicon Valley, like, they're doing stuff where, hey, we want to kill everything. We want to do it with as few employees as possible and make it the much profit. Fuck everybody. This is our job. So, but when they do that, what society is starting to see and what foreign governments are starting to see, what the Senate and the U.S. Congress are starting to see, is that they'll be doing these things, but at that scale, if you don't consider the consequences in terms of how this could disrupt certain segments of society, our democracy.
So that's where the obligation is on the government. I mean, these companies are rapidly becoming today's monopolies. They're becoming They're becoming today's Standard Oil, today's AT&T, and the government's got to look at that. And I mean, look, Silicon Valley under the Obama administration had,
Well, he was in the bed with them. They helped them get elected.
I mean, he they had a open door, right? As if they were garage startups, right?
Yeah.
These companies are monopolies now, and they've got more data. And they know more. They got more data, and they know more about you and me than the government does, right? They know more about anything ever, right? And so ultimately, the government's got to figure out how do you regulate that so that the playing field stays as level as possible. Because what's scarier and different about with them and technology is this is technology disrupting mainstream businesses, and they're going to continue whittling down the employment base as they take over those businesses.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to do more for destroying job, opportunity, and they're creating, jobs, but they're fewer jobs. They're in highly specialized technology fields that, particularly our community, we're not going to make that loop back around, in order to get those jobs. And it may not just be one generation, that it doesn't happen. It could end up being multiple generations, before, somebody's able to circle back, into whatever the new economy is. So I think, it's potentially, and I'm not saying you need to stop the progress of technology. I'm saying we need to be well aware of the effects of technology, because those effects are going to happen a lot faster than people can actually try to recover and train themselves and reorient.
Yeah, let me see. In terms of my knowledge of Facebook's secret plan to go after the black dollars, where they started picking off your sales team, I think the reason they never approached you about a partnership or, hey, let us kind of figure something out, we're coming in this spaces because they're trying to take you out.
I don't think they're thinking about us. I mean, to be honest with you, I think the reason we haven't heard from them is because we're small potatoes. It's chump change,
Well,
right?
Why would they have a multicultural Salesforce?
Because they said, I mean, put it this way, AOL had, for a long time they had black voices, right? I was looking at ComScore the other day, and they got like 1.8 million. I mean, there's like no attention focus there, and that, they were and so all of these companies, they get so big, they think, oh, we need to go into this, genre, but they don't ultimately pay any attention to it. And the main reason why they don't pay any attention to it is because the dollars aren't so big, right? Amazon's starting up an advertising platform. They're not thinking about us, multicultural. They're aiming at Facebook and Google's money.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to Go. You can check me out at Jamarlin Martin on Twitter, and also come check us out at Moguldom.com. That's MOGULDOM.com. Be sure to subscribe to our daily newsletter. You can get the latest information on crypto, tech, economic empowerment, and politics. Let's go.